Hello and welcome to the Space for Kentucky meeting. My name is Izzy House. I am an author of some space marketing books and a podcast host and a Kentuckian. Space for Kentucky Roundtable is a place to bring together all of the space-focused businesses and enthusiasts to learn, discuss, and share insights about the space industry. It provides an opportunity for companies and individuals to come together and to grow our space industry in Kentucky and beyond Kentucky. We have a theme for each meeting, and that way we can have speakers give a sneak peek into the different space industries. There's a list of industries on spaceforkentucky.com, plus the recordings from previous meetings. I encourage you to sign up to receive information about upcoming meetings and notifications and when the recordings are posted. The theme for tonight is NASA Technology Transfer Program, or spin-off technologies. The NASA Technology Transfer Program ensures that innovations that are created up there and for the space industry are brought back down here for the availability to the public and maximizing the benefit to our nation. Our speakers tonight will discuss different aspects of the Transfer Technology Program, what the Transfer Technology Program is, how to use it, and what are its benefits. Our speakers are Lena Little from NASA Langley Research Center, Kimberly Hausbeck from the Space Foundation, and there are two representatives of companies that have used space transfer technology. And that would be Kevin Hickley from Active Pure and Katie Forth from Zibrio. So they're going to give us a sneak peek into what that all is in just a few minutes. Our first guest that is going to present is Lena Little from the NASA Langley Research Center, and she spoke last month at Jobs in Space. When I started going out and asking about who could talk about this, I talked to some people that I knew, and they sent me right back to Lena. She is the wealth of knowledge for all of this stuff. She is a regional partnership lead and a special events coordinator. She is also a small business technical coordinator. So welcome, Lena, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So yes, as Izzy said, I am the regional partnerships lead at NASA Langley in Hampton, Virginia. But NASA kind of gives us a territory for all the NASA centers, and Kentucky is one of our territories. We have a 5-state region that we cover to work with small businesses, industry, and elected officials as well in that 5-state region. So I pay attention a lot to Kentucky related issues, and I'm so happy that Izzy has asked me to come and talk again today about NASA technology transfer. Within our strategic partnerships office, that's where my job resides, as well as technology transfer. And in 1958, when NASA was established, we were NACA before that. We're actually, this is our 106th anniversary at NASA Langley. But in 1958, NASA itself was created. And in the founding legislation, Congress had the forethought to ensure that technologies created for space exploration and aeronautics would benefit all of humanity by establishing the technology transfer program. And as far as I know, that's the first one in the entire United States. Of course, many federal labs now also have technology transfer programs. And through that program, NASA is able to bring together the most capable problem solvers in the world and match them with commercial and entrepreneurial leaders to develop technologies that can provide solutions to everyday challenges in your normal life. Those we call spinoffs. And as we develop our mission work for the agency to solve tough challenges related to exploring space and advancing the understanding of our home planet and improving air transportation for commercial flights, often those inventions have some untapped applications. It takes an entrepreneurial mind to understand the patent licensing process and take those technologies and transform them into commercial products and solutions. So there are a couple different licensing options that we offer. Our inventors go through a process to identify its commercial viability first of all. So they would submit their invention or their IP, their intellectual property, through an internal process that we have that would determine whether or not that information is unique, whether it has commercial viability, and whether or not we're going to issue a patent for it. And then all of that is posted on our website, technology.nasa.gov. You can go there and look at every single technology that we have patented, not just at NASA Langley, but across the agency. We have 10 NASA centers across the country. You can see what technologies might fit your needs. You can search for specific topics, offshore wind energy, batteries, bioengineering, anything that may have been flagged for that technology to put in that bucket so you can see if it would help your business. Businesses or startups or even just students can license that technology, and that license comes in a couple different forms. An exclusive license, which means we don't do them very often, but that would mean that a company would take that and they would be the only other entity in the world that would have access to that exclusive intellectual property. Then we have a non-exclusive license, which means you borrow that intellectual property and see if you can commercialize it, but others may also do the same. Then we have what's called a startup license, which is for a startup company, and part of the point of the program is for economic growth and to help those small businesses. And you may be aware that entrepreneurs and startups, they first of all are green about how to start a business, what they should do. Maybe they just have an idea, but they don't know where to go and how to start. And so the startup license gives them an opportunity to borrow the IP, see if they want to commercialize it, evaluate it. And that last licensing option is called an evaluation license. They're able to see it for a limited period of time at no cost, investigate its viability, and then determine whether or not they want to change that to an actual licensing agreement. Some examples of spinoffs, you can go to spinoff.nasa.gov. That website does not profile every single spinoff that has ever been created, but there's about 2,000 of them there telling really great stories. You're able to actually drill down by state. And so I pulled a few Kentucky ones that I thought were really interesting. And they really just run the gamut of its applications. Some of them are very scientific. For example, satellite data to inform forecasts for crop growth. We actually did a project in Virginia with the viticulture industry, taking the satellite data and seeing where the best places were to grow grapes, because we in Virginia have over 150 vineyards. So that's an interesting way to apply satellite data. Another one that I saw here in Kentucky was for bowling ball spotting. And so there apparently was a company that used NASA technology and physics discoveries to figure out the best way to weight the bowling ball so that it has the proper physics to roll down the bowling alley. Another one here was earthquake information systems, evaluating earthquakes, getting that information out in real time to people to keep them more safe. And then there's some information about zero-G manufacturing. So that's manufacturing in space with no gravity and manufacturing systems. And there was one about turf grass conditioning. So when they took some kind of bioengineering and applied it to golf courses to keep the grass growing at extreme temperatures. I just think this is amazing that the person who's sitting at NASA, the engineer, they're solving a problem that is for NASA. It's very specifically for the work that we are doing. But then there's a whole array of other applications that will benefit from that mission work. So I get the question a lot, why are we spending so much money to go to space when we have so much need here on Earth? And the answer really is that we receive that benefit 100 times over by the research that we do along the way. So you can go to technology.nasa.gov, learn about the licensing process and what technologies we have available for patenting. I'm sorry, for what technologies we have available for licensing. And you can go to spinoff.nasa.gov to learn about all of the wonderful success stories. And I know that you'll hear about that, some of them today as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Are there any quick questions real quick before we go on to the next speaker? And we'll have a Q&A at the end as well. And all right, so we're going to start the next one. Let me go ahead and change the view to gallery again. And Space Foundation is a entity that certifies that the technology that a company is using came from space. Back last summer, I had the opportunity to go to the ISS R&D conference in DC, and I met Kim there, and we literally had a blast, pun intended.
We did.
So Space Foundation is actually the company that is also doing the Space Symposium April 17th through 20th, which is one of the biggest shows for space. So they're a little busy, and Frank got tore away for that. So Kimberly Hausbeck, welcome to the meeting, and we look forward to hearing all about Space Foundation.
Thank you, Izzy. Hi, peeps. I'm Kimberly Hausbeck, and I manage the Certified Space Technology Program at Space Foundation. And just in case some of you aren't familiar with Space Foundation, it is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1983 by several retired Air Force personnel who had a love for space. And it's based in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The mission of the Space Foundation is advocating for innovation, bettering life on Earth. And the organization is divided into three, we call them pillars, essentially stands for divisions. We have our Center of Innovation and Education. So that's a program that works with K through 12 programs, STEM programs, and helps with space education, and also works with universities with space education. Then we have our Global Alliance, which partners with international organizations all over the world, including pretty much every continent except for Antarctica. And then we have what's called Symposium 365. And that is Izzy mentioned Space Symposium is happening next month. That's the division that puts on what is our flagship event. It's an annual event that attracts approximately 15,000 people each year to Colorado Springs. And that's what we are preparing for. We only have a couple of weeks left. And in that same division, Symposium 365 is where my program is, Certified Space Technology program. And that program was created in 1995. And it was created in cooperation with NASA. Specifically, the program was created to help support entrepreneurs and businesses who have licensed that NASA patented technology originally developed for use in space exploration, but now are using that tech in everyday products. And one of the ways that my program helps to support entrepreneurs is with their marketing efforts specifically, because NASA cannot permit the people who license the patented technology, those entrepreneurs cannot use the NASA meatball logo to market. So entrepreneurs who really want to capture and show the market that they have a connection to, like the passion of space, the adventure of space, the cutting edge technology of space. They need another way to do that. And that's where the Space Foundation stepped in and created what's called the Certified Space Technology Seal. And it's a process we have at Space Foundation to verify that a product genuinely and authentically is connected to space exploration and space technology. And once that process is successfully completed, then we call them partners. Certified partners can use our seal in their marketing efforts to showcase their connection to space and showcase the technology that is, unique and special and exciting. So the just one moment. The seal is used currently by 2 of our certified partners who are here today. And I don't want to take up too much time because I do know their products, and both of their products are incredibly relevant and incredibly pertinent to what's going on today. I know that Lena had talked about some examples of different types of spin-off tech, and the range of spin-off technology is pretty broad. You'll find it in healthcare, and you'll find it in agriculture, in environmental conservation, in public safety, in transportation. So the range of fields that spin-off technology touches is fairly broad. And like Lena, I also looked at some Kentucky stats for Space for Kentucky, and there is a report NASA published last year in October 2022 called the Economic Impact Report. And so for Kentucky specifically, the direct impact, positive impact of NASA activities benefited the state to the tune of over $33 million in 2021. And that same report shows that the direct impact of NASA activities for the whole nation is over $71 billion, billion with a B, in 2021. So spinoff is not a small thing, it's a big thing. And I think when you hear the stories of the 2 certified partners here today, Active Peer and Zibrio, you'll really see how space technology does make a positive and significant difference in literally our everyday lives. So I'll end it there because I do want to get to the stories of both Active Peer and Zibrio.
I forgot to do Zoom or forgot to do mute. All right. Well, thank you, Kim. And is there any specific questions before we move on to the stories?
Izzy, I had one more go back because it's my favorite spinoff, but I forgot to mention this. There is a NASA inventor who created a sensor that was then licensed for medical use in pacemakers. And my mom has that pacemaker. So I like to say that NASA saved my mom's life. And so that's my favorite spinoff. That's it.
Awesome. Awesome. That's a good one. And that's a good reason. So the next is we're going to get into the stories. And the first one is Active Pure, which uses some technology to provide cleaner air, and they used tech to fight the pandemic. And I'm very curious as to that story. Active Pure is one of only 75 technologies that have been introduced into the Space Technology Hall of Fame in the past 30 years. So Kevin Hickey from Active Pure, the president of Active Pure, is going to tell us all about what that means.
Great. Well, thanks
So,
for having us today. We appreciate the invite. Love to do things to support the Space Foundation as well as the space program altogether. They've been very good to us, and we certainly like to return the favor whenever we get the opportunity. So thank you for the invitation for today. So yeah, it's a great segue from what you've heard already from Lena and from Kimberly. So we've been around for almost 100 years as a business. We started in 1924 here in the United States, and some of you may remember the name, some of you may not, but your parents certainly would, as we were the original Electrolux vacuum cleaner company initially. Okay, so that's where our roots were. So we were always in trying to take care of people's homes and keep the homes clean and the air clean in homes. Believe it or not, that was a predecessor to air purifiers, and that was making sure you had a good vacuum cleaner taking care of the home. So, but over the years, business has evolved, and certainly ours has evolved over the 100 years. And one of the things we started moving into more was healthy home products, and trying to make sure that we were doing things to advance just past a floor care. So air purification, air filtration became certainly one of the areas that we moved into, back years ago. And at the same time, probably in the 90s, the NASA and had a partnership with the University of Wisconsin, where they were looking to solve a problem where, I think a lot of you know this, but in a lot of the space exploration, whether it's space station, space shuttle, they were always doing experiments. Some of those experiments usually involve growing plants in space. So one of the challenges that they were trying to solve for when growing plants in space is you're producing ethylene gases, the outgassing off of the plants, and you can't just open a window in the space shuttle or in the space station to get rid of those ethylene gases. So they needed to come up with a way to deal with that. And that was the research they worked on together with the University of Wisconsin, and I believe it was in Madison, Dr. Mark Anderson. And they came up with what they call an ethylene scrubber to take care of that problem. And it was first used, I think, in the space program in the 1995, and I believe it was Columbia Space Shuttle program. That was the first chance they had to use it. So, and I'll tell you an interesting story about that here in a minute, but so that was the connection to the space program. Was the ethylene scrubber was basically based on what they call a process called PCO, or photocatalytic oxidation. So it's basically shining an ultraviolet light of a certain wavelength on a target material that's treated with titanium dioxide, and that would create these ethylene scrubbers, for lack of a better term, out of the moisture in the air, the humidity in the air, as well as the air. Going through this catalytic process would create these scrubbers that would disperse the ethylene gases. Okay, so that was the basis of the technology, is PCO, and it's used in a lot of applications all over the world. Has been for years and years and years. But for us, it came into our purview, I guess, in around 2009, when we were acquiring a business that had a technology that was based off a PCO technology as its platform. And we've taken it since then and been able to develop it and through our engineering staff and take it and turn it into what has become a very powerful air and surface purification technology. So, but we love the connection to the space program. So we were always curious about how we could tie into that a little more deeply. And of course, being introduced to the Space Foundation through the company we were acquiring, they had already started to have a relationship there. So I made it my personal mission to work very closely with the Space Foundation from about 2009 on, because I just saw that as a great opportunity for both them and for us to be able to promote exactly what they were looking to promote, right? Which is, how do we take technologies that have been developed for the space program, but bring them back to Earth and commercialize them and be able to use them to help everyone here on Earth. And we thought this was a great story. So we've been very cognizant about trying to make sure, not just a story, but something that is people can really believe in and have technology to back up that the products are going to do what they say they're going to do. So we've done a tremendous amount of testing and validation, and we continue to do so to show the world that this technology is exactly what we say it is. And it's very, very powerful. And it's the same process that I explained earlier. It's a catalytic process, but our formula is what makes this our ActiPure formula, which makes this very special. And it creates these now what we would call, they're not ethylene scrubbers anymore, but these are really just powerful scrubbers that go out into the environment and clean the air in real time in a room, as well as they'll then land on surfaces and tabletops, doorknobs, light switches, everything in the space, and basically purify them as well. So, and all this can be done with people in the environment. No one has to leave the space. It's all very natural. It really is recreating the processes that happen in nature every day, between, the oxidation process that happens naturally in the environment outside. So us getting tied in with the Space Foundation was really important, because they certainly promote this, and they were then kind enough to introduce us to the people over at NASA, and we started dealing with like Terry Taylor, who Lena, I assume you know probably from the technology transfer program down there at the Marshall Space Flight Center. he was part of the induction into the Hall of Fame with us as well back in 2017. So it's just been a great relationship for us. I can't say enough about it. If you don't know much about the Space Foundation and you're tied into a technology, or you have an opportunity to work with them, I highly encourage you to do that, because they're really good at what they do, the folks over there. And we try to make sure that we're out there every year to support them at the Space Symposium and do the things that we can do to return the favor. So come back to us. So we then, in our relationship with the Space Foundation, we're fortunate enough to get nominated for the Hall of Fame, Izzy, you mentioned earlier. So back in 2017, we had the honor of being inducted into the Space Foundation Hall of Fame, along with Dr. Anderson from the University of Wisconsin, as well as the Marshall Space Flight Center and the Technology Transfer Program. And that's certainly been something that we're very proud of. And as you mentioned, at that time, there was only maybe 75 other technologies in the world with that recognition, things that most people would recognize, Tempur-Pedic beds, the Tempur-Pedic mattresses, the GPS systems that everybody now has on their phones and in their cars and just about everywhere in everyday life these days. Satellite radio. I'm trying to think of some of the ones that are just pretty obvious that people would recognize, but there's a whole host of these technologies that, again, started out as Lena mentioned, things that were created for the space program and are now giving back 100-fold and probably 1,000-fold back to the world, because they've been now able to take them and commercialize these and bring them to the world. So we're very happy to be a part of that program. So, and we just think it's a really, really strong connection. It is here domestically, but even more so internationally, because people worldwide are still very, very enamored of NASA and the space program. They just are. It's a different connection with people when you start talking about that. So they really connect to that very heavily, and they really just are proud to be associated with a product that has roots that come from there. So I guess is the best way I can explain it. So that's our story. Again, we're coming up on about 100 years here. And as I said, companies have to keep innovating and changing to stick around that length of time. And we certainly feel like we've made a great jump in technology and innovation with our Active technology. And we're just proud to be associated with both the space program and NASA and the Space Foundation. So Izzy, thank you again for inviting us here today to be part of your.
Well, I've got a quick question.
Absolutely.
So tell us about your part in dealing with the pandemic, using your technology in the pandemic.
Yeah. So as we went through, we knew this technology was very powerful, but as we started doing testing and trying to show people, okay, exactly what can we do and how fast can we do it, we were able to go and start doing, as the pandemic set in a couple of years back now, we knew that there was going to be a challenge right away. I guess it got recognized really heavily starting in March of that year, 2020. But in January, we started hearing rumblings about this situation in China and potentially having something that, was going to create an issue worldwide. So my partner, Joe Urso, who couldn't join us here today, our CEO, and myself, spent a lot of time sitting down and looking at and saying, okay, we've really got to ramp up our supply chain and really get ourselves ready for being able to help people, because we know we have a solution that's going to help people here. Okay, and we have to make sure we have enough of it to be able to do that. A lot of companies got caught short. People that were out there with any other type of purification or filtration products, HEPA filters and things like that. Everybody was very much limited by the amount of inventory they had currently, right? Because a lot of these companies get their products from overseas, a lot of them out of China. And there's a long lead time when you're trying to get to that type of product. So they weren't able to respond very quickly and be able to ramp up their production to be able to meet the demand that was coming. And the demand was unbelievable that came once the pandemic started. We fortunately manufacture most of our products in our facility in Bristol, Virginia. And so our key was just ramping up on the raw materials and making sure we could get as much in here as we could. And we put some very long bets because we just knew it was the right thing to do. And we had to do this because we could be saving lives, whether we knew it or not. That was the potential pitfall of not doing this. So we did, and we ramped up, and we said, well, you know what? We're going to build ourselves. We'll do 6 months of finished goods inventory and another 6 months of raw materials, and that should keep us well ahead of the curve, right? And in the first month, the pandemic really ramped up in March. We sold through all of that inventory, and all the raw materials needed to build the additional inventory. So that whole year's worth of stock that we built up was gone in 30 days because people couldn't get anywhere else. They were running out of everything. So thankfully we had stayed ahead of that and we kept pushing it. We didn't just say, hey, we're going to get 6 months to stop there. We were working to keep that running. So we had plenty in the pipeline that kept coming to us. And so we were able to use our technology to help a lot of people. The part that I didn't mention here is we were doing testing. And of course, once we knew what we were dealing with, this COVID-19 situation, we went and said, okay, who can test for this, right? Because it's like when anthrax or any of these things come out, it's a very limited number of places that can be tested, right? You have to get a BSL-4 lab. Usually military controls those. So we were able to work through some contacts here locally in Texas and through the government. And we got hooked up with a BSL-4 lab here, military lab in Texas. And we were able to get the testing done. And we were able to show that with ActiPure, we were able to eliminate the SARS-CoV-2 virus that came from the COVID-19 in less than, at the first testing we did, it was in I think it was less than 2 minutes. But they came back and told us afterwards, they said, it only shows less than 2 minutes because we weren't able to measure down as low as we needed to, because we think this is doing it even faster than that. We said, well, how can we find that out? And they said, well, we'll have to build another test chamber and get the equipment that'll let us measure even lower to do that. We said, okay, well, let's do that. It's important for us to know this. And sure enough, they went back and did it and came back and said, well, we were right. It actually, in under a minute, you were able to eliminate the SARS-CoV-2 virus in the environment. So from the ambient air and from surfaces takes a little bit longer, but in the ambient air, it's readily just running into it, as the molecules are floating around in there. So are the ActiPure molecules. And as they run into them, they're basically denaturing. Really anything that's a virus, bacteria, fungus, all of those things we've tested against every one of those things, and they all have the same kind of results. Very quick, very effective. And it's an amazing technology. Now, prior to the pandemic, not a lot of people cared about that. They cared about maybe I have allergies or I have asthma and I want to be able to breathe better. So that was how they looked at air purification or air filtration. Once the pandemic hit and they realized this was a lot more dangerous, it was about a lot more than just allergies and asthma. Now suddenly the world takes a whole different outlook on it. So that whole industry has changed pretty dramatically in the last couple of years. And so, as you can imagine, it's been quite a wild ride for us, but we're loving it, and we're just so proud and happy again of all these associations with you guys, but also to be able to get out and help the world. So, and we're not just doing it here in the States; we do it worldwide. So, it's been a pretty amazing run here in the last couple of years. So, I don't know if that answers your question, Izzy, but
It does. It does. So you basically clean the air. And now, does your technology have anything to do with what they treat at the grocery stores, where they take that particular, they make vegetables grow or stay fresher longer? Because
they
isn't
will.
that
I mean, it's so we've got products. We've got over 100 products that have ActiPure technology in them. Everything from just small portable products you would use in your household to commercial type products that would be used in. They can be used in air conditioning systems. They can be used in restaurants, and we have walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers and things of that nature. So yes, we could help people in those type of scenarios, absolutely. So and the beauty of it is we have 100 or so products, but we could design products for any scenario, from this big to industrial size. So it's we're not limited by what we can really do with the technology. So
awesome? Awesome. Well, I do appreciate, and any immediate questions anybody else has before we move on to the next guest. Like I said, we'll have Q&A at the end as well. So thank you, Kevin. I do very much appreciate you coming tonight, and I know it was short notice, so glad to have you here.
well, thank you.
Our next speaker is a person that has, it's Katie Forth, and she is CEO and co-founder of Zibrio, which has been nominated for NASA's Invention of the Year for its fall prevention innovation, where astronauts come back and they have balance issues. Well, so do a lot of older people. So this is a new technology that they've taken from space to help people from falling down. So Katie, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And yeah, I suppose you could say this is now time for something completely different. So we're going from air to people. Is it possible to share a slide? Got pictures if you want to see some pictures? That always makes it more fun, doesn't it?
Yes, you should be able to.
All right. Well, so yes, astronauts, when they return back down to Earth, it's a problem, but also those astronauts on the moon, they also fell down. So this is some screenshots from some of those videos. Mildly amusing. It's always, you know, America's funniest videos kind of variety of thing. But if that astronaut actually fell on a rock and split their suit, that would be catastrophic. So preventing falls on the moon, on Mars, also down here on Earth once the astronauts return has been a strong focus for decades. I was a scientist in the neuroscience laboratory at Johnson Space Center. So I'm based in Houston, and despite the accent, and you know, we've been looking at these data for decades of data just to try and understand, well, what's going on, what's happening to astronauts, and you know, falling down. It's a gravity problem. So if you want to think about here on Earth, you've got many people who fall down. Yes, older adults, but it's actually falling down is the #1 reason for trauma death and trauma injury for any age. Just let that one sink in for a little bit. For any age. So it's you know, it's how well do we handle gravity? If you've got if you're in a health system, they'll usually come up with different risk factors for falling. Usually they'll start with age, although that's not really, it's a bit ageist, honestly. But let's now think of it differently. So if you can understand how well the body's controlling itself relative to gravity, you can now start to get to a point where you can identify who is struggling to handle gravity. So when we're looking at astronauts on the moon, so it's an altered gravity environment, we were designing this invention for Martian expeditions, and maybe they stop off at the moon on their way back down going to Earth, and we want to check their health before they go. And then also the switching between gravity environments is very disturbing for your neuromuscular system. And so given all of that, we want to understand how well the body handles gravity, how well can it control itself. So the original invention was to go inside the moon boot, the Martian boot. We took a big piece of equipment, it was about the size of a phone booth, and we got it into the boot, so into like an insole. And we did that by coming up with a very strong algorithm. It is AI, so we have people now who stand on a scale. That's where we've put the algorithm now. So you stand on the scale, it's measuring the force under your feet. And as you're standing there, of course, your body is going to be making tiny, tiny little movements. We're measuring that across 60 seconds. We use that AI to understand when is the body in control, when is it in equilibrium, and when is it having moments of micro failure of control. So that's what we're doing, but we put it into a very easy to understand score of 1 to 10. So if you are scoring a 1, 2, and 3, that's very high risk for falling. And if you're in the green, you're doing fine, that's low risk for falling. And what this graph here is showing you is that 78% of people who will fall down in the next 12 months are scoring in the range of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is a predictor. This predicts if someone is going to fall down in the next 12 months. And you do it in 60 seconds, just from standing with your eyes open. Now, if you can predict who's going to fall, you can then start to take action to prevent all of that. And just before I talk about the intervention, the score in of itself, I mean, it's fascinating. You can learn so much just with a single test, but also as you track yourself. This is a normative graph. So this is from published data in medical journals. You've got your score from the left, 1 to 10. You've got your risk categories that have nothing to do with age, yellow, green, and red. And this is a normative chart. So this is very similar to the height and weight chart that you'll see with children in the pediatricians. So 50th percentile, that's average for the age. And you'll see that after about 55 years, it's nosediving. So there's a drop 10% per decade. So very often people are thinking about, oh, if you're over 80, then it's a problem. It's like, well, yes, it is a problem. More than half the population is at risk. So we do need to make sure we look after those 80-year-olds and above. But also look at the top 10th percentile for the 90th decade. They're holding pretty strong. Why should we talk to a 92-year-old that's absolutely crushing it and saying, here's some non-slip mats to put in your bath to watch out for? You know, it's not, the things that we want to provide for care need to match up in the ability of that individual. And you can also see here at say if you pick a 65-year-old, and let's say they score a 5, they're average, they're doing fine. A doctor might communicate that and say, all right, Mr. Jones, you scored a 5, you're doing fine, you are average. And Mr. Jones might say, well, I've been average all my life. And the doctor might say, yes, but here's where it's going. How about we do something now to try and elevate you so you have a different trajectory? So not only can we predict 12 months in advance, not only can we provide the context of that score to motivate, but you can now see trajectories 20, 30, 40 years in advance to really start to take action and prevent falls for yourself, but also for a population. When we left this technology in a senior living facility, there was independent senior living in Houston. We just left it there for people to use. There was a 74% reduction in falls with no intervention given. Yeah, it's not a magic scale, but what we do, these are published data as well. We attribute this effect to enhanced self-regulation and self-efficacy. So people started to own their health journey. They saw their score and they thought, yeah, I'm gonna do something about that. Everything became urgent and something that needed to be done now rather than I'll leave it. It's just like our exercise, isn't it? It's like, I'll do that next week. Or if somebody said to you, how much exercise do you do? You'll tell them what you think you do. And then you might think, well, what did I actually do yesterday or the day before? Is it the same? And so that's very much what happens here. Somebody will stand on the scale, they get a score. It's a very, very sensitive piece of equipment. If you have one bad night's sleep, your balance can drop up to 40%. So changes in medications, sleep patterns, mood, diet, obviously exercise patterns, so many things can affect your balance. And until you measure it, you have no idea where you are on any given day and what affects you most. So these particular people, they had a chance to see and they acted on it. Some talked to their doctors about their medications. Some said, I knew that medication was doing something funny to me. I'm going to talk to my doctor. Or another one who unexpectedly scored lower, had a trend that was doing just fine and had an unusual score. I went every Friday and listened. That's what I did for 2 years. And this particular woman, she had a friend who had died that week, and she was feeling pretty down about it. But nothing had changed in her other behaviors. So, there's an acute depression that or mood change that affected her balance. There's also other things like somebody came in with a walker. They came in, they stepped on the scale, they got a 7 out of 10. They scored amazingly. And so, you ask, so who prescribed you the walker? Oh, it was my late husband's. I took it when he died. You may like to speak to your doctor about whether you need it. So, it's just these very personable things that come out of the measurements that we have here. And at this point, we've provided access to over 20,000 people. And that's only just getting the scales onto the market last year. Thank you, pandemic, for all those delays. Finally got there. We are in a number of different places. But you can see here that the head of the National Osteoporosis Foundation, this is an absolute game changer. It absolutely is. You've got a primary care physician who they're being surprised by the people that are being identified as being at risk. And so this is giving the opportunity to reach patients that wouldn't have been reached otherwise. And there's one stat that really captures that, which is that current clinical tools before us were missing 69 to 85% of at-risk individuals. So right off the bat, whatever they were doing, which was usually asking if someone had fallen the last year, whatever they were doing wasn't identifying the right people. So it's been very challenging to then have any kind of fall prevention, and falls have been increasing year after year at 1.4%. So whatever has been done isn't working. So we are in primary care, we're in hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, PT, sports, fitness, in people's homes, anywhere that somebody needs to measure themselves or their patient. We want to make sure that this technology isn't just kept for a few astronauts, but is actually here to help people on Earth. And so that was our mission when we were sitting at lunch at NASA after we'd invented it, realized how powerful it was. And I mean, we literally were talking about our experiences. I had a grandmother who had fallen when she was around 86 or so, had broken her hip and her wrist, and it had ultimately led to her demise. And she was a very athletic lady. My co-founder had a similar experience with his grandmother, and it's preventable. And so when you've invented something and you know how powerful it is, you can't just sit on it. And so we said, we should do something about it. Yes, we should. And we stood up, and that was it. We were off. So it's amazing how important those moments are. I'll just give you one other quick picture, which is, this is one of our versions as well. We have a variety of different versions of packages, and this is a self-testing bundle. I show you this one because this is in Louisville, Kentucky. So it's in the Thrive Center, and that's an innovation center for age tech. So if anybody wants to go and visit, it's a very cool space. It's called the Thrive Center. And they have lots of different technologies that people can come and look at. They have different mock-ups of rooms of different homes. So we have a couple of different implementations there. So yeah, definitely sending our love over to our Kentuckians.
So is that is that the last slide?
It can be.
Oh, no.
I always have more slides than I need.
Okay, gotcha.
Pictures are always good. I guess you can always end on this one, which is we're on a mission to save the world from falling down.
Wow, I have to say, I never thought of falling like that before, and didn't realize that it was so interesting and preventable.
Yeah. And preventable, that's the thing, preventable. It's the fifth highest, most expensive health condition for healthcare spending in the country. Fifth.
Wow. Wow, that's awareness is half the battle right there.
It is, and very often people have denial. We all have denial about all sorts of health situations, and it's only when you get that cold hard number that you're like, oh, okay, all right, this is important now. But if it comes across as someone's opinion, if it's subjective, you don't cut through that denial. And so this is where you can get the 74% reduction, because a lot of it is actually lifestyle related. People do know generally what to do for their health, but until you feel that impetus and that urgency, it's good for another day. But yeah, you can really start to tap into the psyche of people just by this measurement. And we were a sponsor of the National Senior Games in 2019, and then again in 2022. And don't you know, we had more than 20 people come to us in 2022. They remembered their score and they wanted to see where they were that year.
Well, we just don't think it's something that we have any control over. It's just, oh, that's just a part of life. You fall down, when you're little and you scrape your knee, and when you get older, that you don't bounce as you get older. You kind of just shatter. So,
well, and I'm thinking of a high-profile fall in Kentucky, well, with the senator from Kentucky, who the injuries were enough, concussion plus, he was in the hospital, I can't remember how many days, 4 or 5, and then he was in a inpatient rehab for a couple weeks, right?
I did not know that.
Senator
expensive.
Mitch,
McConnell. Okay. I
yeah,
did not know.
he fell just in February and at a hotel in DC, and it was a serious fall, in the hospital for several days, concussion, and then significant amount of time to rehab. So
Yeah,
wow.
and I mean, this is the thing, is that people don't necessarily assume, although I believe he had polio when he was younger, and so obviously some gait and control issues, but you can always maximize yourself. Wherever you are, whatever state you're in, you can always enhance things. I mean, is it a question of, did he sleep badly that night before? So whatever state he was in, and then you add a bad night's sleep, might have dropped him down even lower. And so, yeah, I mean, it's something that when we hear about it, you say, and when anybody trips, what's the first thing they do? They look behind them, don't they? Like, oh, who did that to me? It's not me, it's something back there. It's got me. And so while it's an accident, it's no accident that it happens. So there is a bit of education that's required here, is that you can predict these things. Now, there is one exception, and that is the high velocity falls. Slips and trips are the types that have these high velocities. So if you are low risk on our scale, that doesn't mean you won't fall. It means low probability of falling. But people in that category, if they fell, 72% of the time, it's because of a slip or a trip. So if you're trying to then communicate to a patient or a loved one or anyone about how to prevent a fall, let's say you're osteoporotic and you're scoring an 8 out of 10. So your balance is great, but the consequence of falling down is so high, really want to be careful. So then it's like, the communication there is, you're doing great, you're balancing well, so feel good about that. But just know, people like you, if you were to fall, it's 72% of the time it's because of a slip or trip. Here are some things to help avoid slips and trips. Now you're really speaking the language of that person, and it really resonates with them, so that they'll want to act on that information. Whereas before, like I said, if you just give a generalized solution, you're missing the chance to actually reach them properly.
Wow. Well, that's extremely interesting. Thank you so much. And do we have any questions? Let's open it up to everyone, and let's have some question time. And you are all on mute, so I'm gonna unmute. Well, I can't unmute you. I can only ask you to unmute. So now's the time to ask all of our guests some questions. Well, go back to the what did you end up doing for the astronauts in their boot?
Well, so I mean, we ended up not getting into the boot in the end. But we did use our data to then identify some of the different adaptations that happen when they return. But we're actually being used in a vomit comet study in June, so that's exciting. So we've got some of those scales are going to start flying around as well. It's a very quick assessment, and one of the things, I mean, it's a little hard when NASA's invested $100,000 into a piece of equipment to say, oh, we've got this one for a lot cheaper, that's even better.
No, please,
so yeah,
we want to know that, because we're then going to buy the cheaper one. That's okay.
Yeah, the difference in price, we charge $190 per month, so bit of a magnitude difference there, but yeah, so I mean, it's there in terms of trying to help identify that particular piece of it. For astronauts, they do have a lot of vestibular adaptations. We're not especially paying attention to that, so the machine they have does more than just measure balance, can't predict falls, but it can try and help to separate how well they're readapting with their vestibular system. So there still has value.
Awesome. So are there any other questions for anybody? All right. Well, I with all my heart, I appreciate you presenting tonight and adding to our information, because I think that people don't realize just how much space impacts their daily life. And this is a part of getting that awareness out, is that it is in every aspect of your life, even places you don't even think. So with that, I'm going to call the meeting. And if you want to see the recording, it's at spaceforkentucky.com, and we'll have that this weekend. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
You,
you.
Izzy.
Thank
for
you.
having me. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.